Ziva sat alone on the wet grass, watching the car that brought her disappear into the trees. No food, no blanket, just silence, and the sharp sting of knowing your own blood left you behind, again. But an hour later, when a news van screeched to a halt beside her, cameras rolling, they didn't know the world was about to watch them beg. Ziva sat quietly under a tree, while everyone else laughed and ate. It was the family picnic, but it never felt like family to her. Her older siblings didn't like having her around. They always made her feel like she didn't belong. She wasn't loud like them. She didn't dress fancy. She didn't know how to force herself into conversations that didn't want her. The only reason she was even there was because their mother insisted. If it were up to her siblings, Ziva would have been left at home. They barely spoke to her the whole time. She helped set up the food, laid out the blankets, and cleaned up after them like a helper, not a sister. No one thanked her. They only called her when they needed something passed. When it started raining, people rushed to pack up. Everyone scrambled into the cars. Ziva looked around, waiting for someone to call her name. No one did. She stepped forward, thinking maybe they didn't see her. But the doors slammed shut, one after another, and the cars started moving. Her cousin Rio rolled down the window just enough to say, "She'll figure it out," and then laughed as they drove off. Ziva stood there, soaking wet, the grass cold beneath her bare feet. She didn't chase the cars. She didn't scream or cry. She just stood still, blinking back the tears that tried to fall. Maybe they really didn't want her. Maybe they never had. She walked slowly back to the tree and sat down again. Her clothes were damp. Her stomach growled, but she stayed quiet, like always. She kept hoping maybe someone would come back for her. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe they were just playing a cruel joke and would return soon. But time passed, and no one came. The rain lightened, but the clouds stayed. The picnic spot was now empty. Plates were still lying around. Bits of food were soggy and scattered. And Ziva, small, silent Ziva, sat alone, left behind not by accident, but by choice. And she knew it. That kind of hurt didn't need to be explained. It just stayed, quiet, like her. Ziva sat under the same tree, her clothes still a little wet, her hands resting on her knees. She didn't know how long she had been there. The sound of laughter and footsteps from earlier had faded. Now, all she could hear was the wind in the trees and the quiet beating of her own heart. Her stomach hurt from hunger, but more than anything, she felt a deep sadness. She didn't expect much from her family, but she never thought they'd really leave her behind like that. As she stared at the muddy grass in front of her, she noticed a small pair of shoes stop nearby. She looked up slowly. A little girl, maybe 7 or 8 years old, was standing in front of her. The girl didn't speak. She just smiled gently and held out a sandwich wrapped in a napkin. Ziva blinked in surprise, then slowly reached out and took it with both hands. "Thank you," she whispered. "She saw you sitting alone and wanted to help," a calm voice said from behind the girl. Ziva looked up again and saw an elderly woman walking toward her, holding a sketchbook. Her hair was grey, tied back in a scarf, and her eyes were kind. She sat down beside Ziva without asking, like it was the most natural thing in the world. "You're very quiet," the woman said softly, glancing at her sketchbook. "Maybe that's why they forget you." Ziva looked away, her eyes stinging. The woman didn't press. She opened her sketchbook and showed Ziva a page. It was a beautiful drawing of the picnic spot. Trees, people, blankets, food, all captured in soft pencil strokes. Ziva's eyes widened. "You draw?" she asked quietly. "Yes," the woman smiled. "And I watch. I notice things others don't." Ziva stared at the drawing, then at the old woman. "What do you love doing, child?" she asked gently. Ziva didn't answer right away. No one had ever asked her that. Not her mother, not her siblings, not anyone. The question felt strange in her ears, like it didn't belong to her. But slowly, like a light switching on inside her, Ziva remembered something, a feeling, a memory. "I used to draw," she said slowly, "when I was little, but I stopped. No one really cared." The woman nodded thoughtfully, then reached into her bag and pulled out a small pencil and a torn piece of paper. "Draw something," she said kindly. Ziva hesitated. Her hands trembled as she took the pencil. She looked around, then picked up a fallen leaf and a flower petal. She placed them beside her and began to sketch, slowly at first, then faster, her fingers remembering what her heart had nearly forgotten. And as Madame Ebele watched her work, a small smile touched her lips. She had just found something rare, something real. something the world needed to see. Ziva sat cross-legged on the ground, her small hands moving gently over the rough paper Madame Ebele had given her. The pencil felt light but powerful in her grip. For the first time in years, she felt something warm inside, something like peace. She looked around the picnic area, now quiet and almost empty. She picked up a few fallen flower petals, a long blade of grass, and some leaves. Then she spotted a piece of burnt firewood nearby. She crawled over to it and broke off a piece of soft charcoal. She rubbed the charcoal on the edge of a stone to make a sharp point. Then she dipped a leaf into water from a nearby puddle and used it like a paintbrush. Slowly, on the piece of paper, she began to shape something beautiful. A picture formed, not just any picture, but one filled with detail and life. She drew the leaf's tiny veins, the soft round shape of the flower petal, and even the texture of the wet grass. The paper started to look like a small window into nature itself. Madame Ebele watched silently. Her eyes followed every stroke of Ziva's hand. She could see that this was not just a bored child playing with mud and leaves. This was art, real, natural, raw, and it came from a girl who had just been left behind like she didn't matter. But here she was, making something that did matter. "What are you using?" Madame Ebele finally asked, her voice low and amazed. Ziva looked up shyly. "Just what I can find," she said. The woman leaned closer, gently taking the drawing from Ziva's hands when she was done. She studied it with care, turning it slowly in the light. Then she looked at Ziva, her eyes soft but serious. "You made this?" she asked. Ziva nodded slowly. "Yes." Madame Ebele didn't say anything else. She took out her phone and quietly texted someone. Ziva didn't notice. She'd gone back to picking more leaves and flowers, excited now, completely lost in her world of drawing. She had already started another piece, using the same tools, a wet leaf, a burnt stick, and her imagination. She didn't know that while she sketched under the tree, something big had started. Madame Ebele had sent the photo of her drawing to a contact in the media, a team that ran a special program about hidden young talents across Africa. She had typed only a few words. "You need to see this. Found a gem." But Ziva didn't know any of that. She just kept drawing, her head bent low, her fingers stained with charcoal and flower colors. She didn't know the world was about to discover her. She only knew that for the first time in a long time. She felt seen. Ziva was still sitting under the tree, completely focused on her drawing. Her fingers were covered in soft black charcoal, and her nails had tiny bits of green and red from flower petals. She didn't notice the sound of a van pulling up, or the quick footsteps on the grass. She was in her own little world, making the paper come alive with every soft stroke of her hand. But Madame Ebele stood up and walked toward the people who had just arrived. They carried cameras, microphones, and a small banner that read, "Hidden Geniuses of Africa." One of the crew members looked confused and asked, "Where is she?" Madame Ebele simply pointed to the tree. "There," she said softly. "Zoom in on her hands first." The cameraman nodded and walked quietly towards Ziva, being careful not to disturb her. He lifted the camera, focused the lens, and started recording. The camera zoomed in close, showing her small hands holding the leaf gently, sketching with so much care and detail. Every movement felt special. Every line had a story. Ziva looked up, finally noticing someone was watching. She froze for a second, but the kind voice of Madame Ebele reached her ears. "Keep going, my dear. Don't stop. They're here to see you." Ziva's eyes widened. "Me?" she asked. "Yes." Madame Ebele smiled. "You're the reason they came." The man behind the camera gave her a small smile too. "You're very talented," he said. "We've never seen anything like this." Ziva looked down at her drawing, still unsure if this was all real. But she kept sketching. Even with the camera on her, she let her hands speak. The team stood around her in quiet awe, watching her create beauty from nothing but nature and broken pieces. One of the reporters whispered to Madame Ebele, "How did you find her?" "She wasn't lost," the old woman replied. "She was just ignored." As Ziva finished her sketch, the cameraman turned to his team. "We'll air this tonight," he said. "People need to see this." Madame Ebele nodded. "This isn't just a video," she said. "We're preparing her first exhibition. We'll show her art live at the gallery next month. She deserves it." Ziva couldn't believe what she was hearing. Her drawings, in a real gallery, people would come to look at them. She looked around at the crew, at the kind faces, at Madame Ebele, and for the first time, Ziva felt something she had never truly felt before. important. At home, the picnic had ended. Ziva's family sat around the living room, unpacking leftovers and sharing jokes. Her aunt was busy folding the picnic blanket while Rio scrolled through his phone, sipping on a cold soda. Her older sister was uploading pictures from the picnic, laughing at the poses they had taken. No one mentioned Ziva. No one even asked if she got home safely. It was like she didn't exist. Then suddenly, the TV volume went up. Her uncle had been flipping through channels and stopped at a program that caught his eye. Hidden Geniuses of Africa. A soft voice was speaking, and a familiar image appeared on the screen. It was Ziva. She was sitting under a tree, sketching with charcoal and flower petals, her small hands moving carefully across a sheet of paper. The camera zoomed in to show the art, detailed, beautiful, and completely made from natural materials. The words on the screen read, "Forgotten girl turns forest floor into masterpiece." The room went silent. Rio's soda slipped from his hand and hit the floor, spilling across the carpet. He didn't even notice. His mouth was slightly open, eyes locked on the screen. That's our cousin," he whispered. Her sister sat frozen, phone in hand. Her aunt, who had mocked Ziva earlier that day for being too quiet and too plain, said absolutely nothing. She stared at the TV with wide eyes and a tight jaw. No one laughed now. The reporter's voice continued. "Found alone at a picnic spot. Young artist Ziva amazed us with drawings made from leaves, charcoal, and flower petals. Her work will be featured in an upcoming art gallery, sponsored by Madame Ebeli herself." The camera cut to a clip of Ziva, smiling shyly at the ground, holding her drawing close to her chest. Her mother stood at the doorway, her eyes full of confusion and something else, something close to guilt. "They left her there," she whispered under her breath. Rio stood up, walking closer to the screen like he needed to see her better. "She never told us she could draw," he said. "She did once," her sister muttered. "We just didn't care." For the first time, the silence in the room wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, heavy with regret, heavy with the realization that the girl they ignored, the one they always left out, had become something they never expected, someone worth watching. And now, the whole world was watching her. The next morning, cars pulled up fast outside the art center, where Ziva had been invited to display her sketches. Doors slammed, voices shouted. Her family had come, all of them. Her mother, her aunt, her siblings, even Rio. They walked quickly, holding their phones, wiping their eyes like they had been crying. But their faces didn't show true sadness. They looked more shocked than sorry. Inside the hall, Ziva was not alone anymore. She was standing beside Madame Ebele, surrounded by cameras and smiling strangers. Some were art curators, some were reporters. They asked her gentle questions and praised her work. Her drawings were displayed on a board made from recycled wood. Everyone looked at them with wide eyes, as if they had never seen something so unique. Nature turned into beauty by a girl who was once left behind. Her siblings finally reached her. One by one, they tried to hug her. They smiled too hard. They said things like, "Why didn't you tell us you were this talented?" And "We had no idea." Their voices were full of fake surprise, but their eyes searched the room, looking at the cameras, the lights, the attention. Ziva looked at them quietly. These were the same people who left her in the rain, the same arms that shut car doors while she stood there alone, the same mouths that never once asked if she had dreams. She gave a small smile but stepped back. She didn't say a word. She didn't hug them. She didn't shout or cry. She didn't ask, "Why now?" because she already knew the answer. Madame Ebele gently placed a hand on Ziva's shoulder, reminding her that she didn't need to go back to what hurt her. She had stepped into a new chapter now, a world that saw her, that clapped for her, that valued her silence, her art, her story. Her mother wiped another tear and said, "We're proud of you." But it was too late for those words to feel real. Ziva stood with her hands by her sides, her heart calm. She looked around the room at the people who had lifted her, not because they had to, but because they believed in her. She didn't need their hugs. She didn't need their praise. Not anymore. She had finally learned the truth. Being seen by the right people is worth more than being accepted by the wrong ones. Ziva sat quietly on a small chair in front of the camera, lights shining softly around her. A kind reporter asked her questions about her drawings, her inspirations, and how she felt being recognized after so many years of being ignored. Ziva didn't rush her answers. She spoke slowly, gently, like her words were falling from her heart. She didn't blame anyone. She didn't cry. She didn't speak badly about her family. She just shared her truth, softly but clearly. She talked about how she used to draw in silence, using scraps of paper, burnt sticks, and flower petals when no one was watching. She said she never thought anyone would care. And when the reporter asked how she felt now, with all eyes on her, Ziva paused. She looked at the camera, not with anger, not with pain, but with quiet strength. Then she said, "I wasn't invisible. You just never looked." That one sentence, just a few words, made everyone in the room freeze. The reporter slowly lowered her microphone. The cameraman looked at Ziva like he had just heard something powerful. People behind the scenes went quiet, and then someone clapped. Just one person at first, then another, and another. Soon the room was filled with soft claps, not loud or wild, but full of respect. Later that night, the clip from her interview was posted online. No music, no flashy effects, just Ziva's calm voice and that one line. It spread fast. People shared it everywhere, on Facebook, on YouTube, on TikTok. The comments flooded in. Strangers from all over the world said they cried when they heard her words. Some said they were reminded of their own childhood, their own pain of being ignored, of not being chosen, of being treated like background. Artists reposted it. Teachers showed it to students. People wrote her name in bold letters, calling her brave, calling her strong. But Ziva wasn't chasing attention. She didn't post the video. She didn't even watch it again. She just continued drawing, quietly, peacefully, like she always had. But now, people listened. They looked, and they saw her. Her words didn't need to scream to be heard. They whispered into hearts, and that's why they stayed. Ziva was sitting by the window of her small studio room, sunlight falling on her sketchbook. Her phone buzzed for the 4th time that morning. She looked at the screen. It was her mother again. She didn't pick up right away. She just stared at the name and remembered all the time she had waited for this woman to see her, to notice her, to say something kind. Now suddenly the calls were non-stop. She finally answered. Her mother's voice came through, shaky and full of tears. "Ziva, please come home. We'll treat you better now, I promise. We didn't know. We didn't realize." Ziva stayed quiet. She had nothing harsh to say, no anger in her voice. She just let her mother speak, her words falling between sobs and pauses. "Your siblings miss you. We're so proud of you. Please just come back. We'll do things differently now." But Ziva already knew something deep inside her. Some things don't change just because the world is watching. Some people only love you when others clap for you, and she had spent too many years waiting to be accepted by those who never tried to understand her. She looked over at the envelope lying on her table. Inside was her full scholarship offer to study fine arts at one of the top schools in Cape Town. Everything was covered. Madame Ebele had taken care of it all. The fees, the travel, the supplies. She believed in Ziva like no one ever had. This wasn't a prize. It wasn't fame. It was a door to a new life, one that Ziva had created for herself. She gently told her mother, "Thank you for calling, but I'm not coming back. Not now." There was silence on the line. Then her mother whispered, "We love you." Ziva gave a small, kind smile. "I love you too, but I need to be where I'm seen." She ended the call softly and placed the phone down. She wasn't angry. She wasn't bitter. She was just ready to move forward. This wasn't about proving anything to them anymore. It was about choosing herself. Outside the window, a plane flew past in the sky, and inside her heart, Ziva already felt like she was flying too. Not because of the attention, not because people finally noticed, but because for the first time, she had chosen her own path, and she was walking it, one step at a time, with quiet strength. The night of Ziva's art exhibition finally arrived. The gallery was filled with soft lights, quiet music, and people dressed in neat clothes, moving slowly from one painting to the next. Her drawings, once made with leaves and burnt sticks, now hung in gold frames on clean white walls. Each one had a story. Each one had pieces of her, her silence, her hurt, her dreams. Ziva stood near the back, not seeking attention, just watching. People walked up to her, shaking her hand, saying kind words, calling her an inspiration. She smiled politely and thanked them, but her eyes kept drifting to the entrance. Soon, her family arrived. Her mother, her siblings, even her aunt and cousin Rio walked in, holding their phones high, recording the gallery as if they had been a part of the journey all along. They moved from painting to painting, posing beside each one, taking selfies with big smiles. They tagged her in stories online, writing captions like, our little artist, and so proud of our Ziva. Some guests looked confused, wondering who they were. Others just nodded politely. But Ziva didn't walk over to them. She didn't stop them. She didn't ask them to leave. She simply stayed where she was, calm and quiet. Let them take the pictures. Let them post whatever they wanted. She knew the truth. She remembered sitting alone at that picnic, wet and cold, while they drove away laughing. She remembered the silence at home, the way they never asked what she loved or what made her happy. She remembered the fake hugs, the sudden tears when the cameras came. And she remembered the one person who stayed, Madame Ebeli, the woman who saw her before the world did. Ziva didn't need to correct anyone. She didn't need to remind them of what they had done. She just stayed silent, the same way she always had. Only this time, the silence wasn't lonely. Now it was strong, because she had found her own voice in her art, and the people who mattered had seen her when she had nothing to give. So, while her family smiled for pictures and told the world how proud they were, Ziva smiled too, not because of them, but in spite of them. She didn't need their praise. She didn't need their approval. She already had something better: peace. 1 year after the night of her first exhibition, Ziva didn't settle down or try to fit into the fame others were now chasing for. Instead, she went back to the places that had once ignored her, the small towns, the quiet corners, the villages where children still drew in the sand with sticks, just like she once did. She remembered what it felt like to have so much inside but no one to see it. So she built something that didn't ask for permission. She called it the Quiet Bloom, a mobile art school that traveled across West Africa, stopping in communities where no one ever asked children, "What do you want to create?" The school wasn't fancy, just a bright van filled with colors, brushes, sketchbooks, and tiny easels. But to the kids who waited barefoot under trees, it was a castle. They came running when they saw her van, eyes wide, hearts open, and Ziva never talked down to them. She sat on the ground with them, taught them how to tell stories through shapes and colors. Some kids drew flowers, others drew the things they were too afraid to say out loud. One day, a massive billboard went up in her old town. On it was Ziva's calm face, a paintbrush in her hand, and the words, "The Quiet Bloom, where little dreams find loud colors." Rio saw it first while walking home from school. She stopped, looked up at it for a long time, and whispered, "We left her in the mud, and now she paints the sky." People in town began to ask about Ziva with pride in their voices. They shared her posts online, tried to act like they had always supported her, but Ziva didn't slow down to notice. She was already on a plane, heading to her next class in a small village by the border. No makeup, no crowd, just her backpack, her art supplies, and her calm smile. Ziva didn't need the front row at anyone else's table. She had built her own, and it was moving, village to village, child to child, brushstroke by brushstroke. She was planting something beautiful, not fame, not revenge, just hope. She didn't need noise to be powerful. She didn't need applause to be seen. She was the quiet girl they left behind. And now, she was unstoppable. If you've ever been overlooked, ignored, or underestimated, remember Ziva. You don't need to scream to be heard. You don't need permission to shine. You don't have to beg for a seat. Build your own table. Paint your own sky. Tag someone who needs to hear this today. Follow for more powerful African stories that uplift the quiet voices.